why don't you start out telling us, or telling me about your mother, Lois Turner, Warrick, and where she came from, her family, her siblings, that kind of thing.
Well, let's see. Lois Turner from Du Bois, Nebraska. And her dad's name was Robert. And she had a sister named Ruth. And she graduated from Du Bois High School. And then she went to Pawnee City to get her teacher's certificate so she could teach. So she taught out in the country. And then she taught a couple years. And she married my dad, both Warrick. It's W-A-R-R-I-C-K. It's not Warwick, it's Warrick. And they moved to a farm and farmed. Mom had never been on a farm. And she found a lot of things different. But she did raise a lot of chickens. And had laying hens and had eggs to sell. And I think she liked the farm. Of course, I lived on the farm till I moved to Pawnee City. What else would you like to know about my mother?
Tell me about her parents.
Well, all I know is the Turners, I think, originally came to Du Bois from someplace in Missouri. Like people at that time, moved around. And her dad was a painter. He painted barns and houses and I don't think very much inside work, but mostly outside. That's what he did for a living, believe it or not. And sometimes he came to our house and did some painting for Mom. Mm-hmm. But of course, her mother died at an early age, so I never knew a grandmother then.
What did she die of, Mom?
I don't really know. A lot of people died young in those days. Mm-hmm. So Grandpa Turner had a house in Du Bois. He lived there alone, and he never remarried.
When you say she died young, do you know about what age she was when she died?
Any
idea?
Probably fairly young according to now. Probably, 30s or 40s is all.
Okay.
Hey, Tom, could we not go in and out the door? Say that one more time, Mom. We're rolling.
My grandmother Turner died real young. But I knew my grandfather Turner because he lived in Du Bois and lived a good age. And we used to go to Du Bois. And Mom would always stop to see Grandpa Turner there. Mm-hmm. So I knew him. And he kept a nice clean house. I know that for a man that lived by himself. Mm-hmm. And never remarried.
That's right. And do you know about how old he was when he died?
Well, he was, probably 70-some or even 80-some. He was up in years. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, who was Aunt Sally, Mom?
All right, that was Grandpa Turner's sister. He had a sister, and she married a man named John Baird, B-A-I-R-D. Mm-hmm. And they lived right across the road from Grandpa Turner.
In Du Bois.
In Du Bois. And Aunt Sally and Uncle John had a drugstore in Du Bois. That's what they did for a living. And I suppose Uncle John was a pharmacist. They had a drugstore. It's a small drugstore in Du Bois because Du Bois wasn't very big, of course, in those days, but that's what he did. And they lived close to Grandpa, so right across. So we'd go to both places.
So Aunt Sally was his only sibling then?
That I know of, right? Yeah, the only young one that I ever knew, yes.
Right. And did she help when he raise any of, I would guess, Grandma's family, like her brothers and sisters?
Well, Mom had the brother Richard, and since his mother had died rather young, so Aunt Sally kind of helped, although he probably didn't live with her. They just lived across the street. Mm-hmm. And then Uncle John and Aunt Sally saw that he got to go to the University of Nebraska and be a teacher.
And that was Uncle Dick.
That's Uncle Dick.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And Miss Ruth Monroe lived down in Hannibal, Missouri. Never came up here. Never lived up here.
And Ruth Monroe was?
The sister.
The sister, okay. I see. Okay. So Grandma was kind of a farm girl. I mean, a town girl.
Yes.
And never lived on the farm till she married
until
Grandpa.
she married
Grandpa Oath.
She married old Warrick, yes. Sure, never had lived on a farm at all.
Do you know how they met?
I don't believe I know exactly because Grandpa Warrick lived in Du Bois too. He had me retired, so I suppose they were in a probably close to know each other.
Mm-hmm.
Grandpa Warrick retired and lived in Du Bois too,
Mm-hmm.
and so did Grandpa Turner.
Mm-hmm.
So they were in the same vicinity.
Right. Right. Anything else of note about the Turner family?
Not too much do I know about except Grandpa Turner,
Mm-hmm.
and then Mom had a sister that lived in Hannibal, and she'd come up to visit.
Hmm?
And she had a husband named Sid Monroe.
Hmm?
Sydney, actually.
Mm-hmm.
But Aunt Ruth would come up, stay a couple, 3 weeks because to see her dad and to see Mom.
Sure.
Come by herself. Because her husband died fairly young, so she was by herself in Hannibal. And I did go to Hannibal once with the folks, Missouri, which at that time, for me, that was quite a trip. Hannibal, Missouri is on the Missouri River.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an old town and rather interesting. But that was one of the highlights of our life. And Aunt Ruth would come, and then she'd come off the farm a little bit too. Of course, she wasn't used to being on the farm either. But we kind of had fun with somebody who wasn't used to the farm because she lived in the city. She lived in the city. And she lived in... Now, Hannibal is a very hilly town, city.
Mm-hmm.
And she lived... You had to walk... To go downtown, you had to walk down the hill to Hannibal, and then to get back up to where she lived, you had to walk way back uphill because Hannibal was built on a real hilly town. And the river is clear down flat, of course.
So that's what you remember from being a kid?
Yes, I do remember getting to go some way or another. I got to go back down to Hannibal and stay with Aunt Ruth for a while. And then
Was
somebody,
that just you as the oldest?
No, that was just me.
Okay.
Because I was older. And that was one of the highlight of my life, actually. I was going to a big city.
How old were you?
I expect I was just about out in high school.
Mm-hmm.
Probably 14, 15, or 16.
And what did Sid do for a living?
He managed a shoe factory. They made shoes in Hannibal, Missouri. For women and men, I think. So he worked in a shoe factory, believe it or not. And where they made shoes. I don't know what brand they were now. I suppose a lot of brands.
Mm-hmm.
It was a big factory in Hannibal, Missouri.
Is that right?
Uh-huh.
Huh. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's what Uncle Sid did.
What about Grandpa Warrick's family? Tell me about the Warricks.
Well, the Warricks came from, originally I think they came from Germany one time. And I think Grandpa Warrick probably came here young and settled and had a farm.
And what was his name? And his wife's name?
What?
Jacob?
Jacob. We called him Jake. I called him Jake. Because his wife died young, so I didn't know a Grandma Warrick. But he farmed. In fact, he lived on a farm not too far from Du Bois. And then later moved into town and just lived in town by himself. I remember he had bought a house.
Mm-hmm.
And so my grandpa lived one end of Du Bois and Grandpa Turner lived on the other end.
So your other grandmother died young too?
Yes.
And do we know, again, how or what happened?
No, I really
how
don't.
How young? Or...
They were fairly young if you looked in that. Yeah, they would have been.
Mm-hmm.
They lived alone for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I suppose so. And so Grandpa had, I know, 2 sisters and a brother, I can't remember. Russell.
And Ruth.
Uh-huh.
And Lil.
Yeah. What do you know about them?
Well, Russ lived in he moved back here from Colorado someplace, and then he farmed.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had Mildred and Maureen, cousins. They lived on a farm. And I guess he died out there on that farm. That wasn't too far from Du Bois.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they had a son named Keith who was going out to see about the cattle. And he got caught on the fence, crawling over the fence and died. That was Keith Warrick.
It's too bad.
Of course, you do know that I had a brother that died in the barn fire,
Mm-hmm.
Bobby,
Right.
when he was about 5 or 6.
Right.
But I got out.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He got to the door and the door was locked and he didn't get out and I went out the other way.
That's
So
too
that
bad.
I can remember that. I'm big enough.
How old were you then?
I was 10 or so, probably 11. I was old enough to remember the whole. I can remember the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I remember talking about this a while back. Before Grandma and Grandpa got married, he went off to work someplace, right? Didn't he?
Who did?
Grandpa Warrick, Grandpa Oath, and he sent Grandma the. What did he do? He sent her money, or he sent
Oh,
her
he
the
must have
ring,
been-
or what? What's the story
Oh,
about
he
when
would
they
have
were
been in
courting
the-
and dating when he wanted to marry her?
He would have been in
Wyoming.
Yeah, Wyoming. I think that's right. And he was working there, and he sent her a ring through the mail, I think. And then he came back, and they were married, and then he farmed. And then he farmed all of his life. Then
So why did he go to Wyoming? Just to
to
find
get work, yeah.
Because he didn't want to farm, or what?
Well, at that time, it wasn't so easy to just go out and farm for somebody. If you didn't own a farm, you just had to work for somebody. He worked, so he went back there, and then came back and decided to farm. And we lived on a farm, and then they bought another farm down by Oneida that he bought,
Mm-hmm.
and that was his, and that's where they built a nice house.
Mm-hmm.
And that was after I was.
So he mailed her this ring, and then what year were they married? Do you remember?
Well, now we can figure that out. I was born December the 7th of 1920, and they were married about 9 months before that.
According to this, it was April of 1920.
That'd be about right. Huh. I see.
In Bern, Kansas.
Bern, Kansas. That's what our address was. And then later, when he bought the farm, that was Oneida, Kansas. Yes,
So you like you said, your mother had to adjust to being on the farm.
definitely.
What do you remember? What she said about that? What she told you about that?
Not
what that was
exactly,
like?
although she took to it very well, and she raised a lot of chickens and had lots of eggs and
Garden.
yes, garden. And she just,
So who taught her all these things? How did she learn?
I suppose her dad. I mean, both dad. My dad, both probably did, because she had lived in town all her life. But she was. I think she liked the country. I think she liked the farm. She liked the chickens. She liked her garden and the flowers. She had flowers too. And then when they bought the place down by Oneida, it was an old house, but they bought it through that government loan thing during those years. And so you had to redo it. You had to reconstruct it. It was an old house. So they went all over it and got met out in the country. Then it was a nice place. They built on one great big room, the living room, dining room. They built that on. And it was Dad picked that farm because it had a lot of lowland. Or another word for that. Bottom. And that raised better crops than hills. And he just happened to hit it just right. He bought that farm about the time the war, World War II, and the prices were good, and he had good crops. And that made a difference, there ain't any doubt about it. And I think my dad was a good farmer.
Did he like it?
Oh yes. Oh yes.
And what did he raise?
Well, he had corn, wheat, and he had pigs that he's hogs and cows to milk. They sold cream. Sabetha had a creamery, and they sent the man around with a truck, collected your cream can. And that way, with the eggs and the cream can, you had a little check to buy flour and sugar and things that you needed because you didn't have a lot of cash until you sold your crops.
Right. Right.
But
Do you have any idea how many acres he farmed?
I think that was 160. Most of the farms were about 160. That sounds right, I think, around that.
Did he do it mostly himself and then?
Oh, once in a while he had to have a hired man to help. And that time you had to chuck corn by hand.
Man.
You didn't have the machine to pick the pickers then.
Right.
You checked, but I know he had the wheat and he had the corn, and then he raised pigs, sold the hogs, and we milked the cows, and I helped him.
Mm-hmm.
All during high school, I helped him milk cows.
So you were the oldest.
I'm the oldest.
And then where does Bobby fit in then?
Bobby would have been just a little younger, a couple of years. And then
Younger than Mary? Because it's you?
No, he'd be younger than me.
Okay.
Then Joyce. Then Mary.
Okay.
And Jean is 10 years younger than I am.
Mm-hmm.
There were hard times and probably good times. But farmers usually do have some hard and good times as far as that goes. And it was a rented farm, but he did better when he bought the farm down by Oneida then. And he had, like I said, good crops. And the Warriors made good money. There's no doubt about it.
So what do you remember? What are some of the things you remember most as a kid growing up on the farm and with your family and everything?
Well, one of the first things, I had to go get the cows. On the one farm, we had a lot of timber. There was a creek going through there. So they took them down there to graze. So when I got old enough, I took them down there. And then when it's time to leave, I went after them.
When you say old enough, about what age are you
I
talking
suppose
about?
I was 10 or 12, at least 12.
Mm-hmm.
So you go in on this side of the fence. There was a bridge, see, in between. And if you were lucky, they were by the gate. If they weren't, you had to go clear back. And you know the cows in, you put a bell on one of them. You heard of that? And you hear that bell, then you know where the cows were. So
Because they'd all kind of stick together then.
And sometimes they'd be on the other side of the creek. And I was always supposed to come back and cross the bridge. Go get it. But there was a low spot in the creek that you could wade across. But you weren't supposed to do that. And usually I didn't. Because you never knew that old creek could have some little, what they call those, there was no bottom end to them.
Ooh.
You weren't supposed to be getting it now.
About how many cows we're talking about?
Oh, we had about 9 or 10
That's
milk
plenty
cows.
for one 12-year-old too.
Well, Dad helped. I just did help. Dad and I.
Oh, so you didn't have to do it by yourself?
No, Dad milked and I.
Oh, okay.
Unless he went to town, and I always thought, and I've heard somebody else say this once, it seemed like he never got home to help. Now, I talked to another lady about that, and she said, yeah, that sounds just like my dad. They knew you were going to get it done before they got there.
Did you like doing that, or was it
I
just
didn't mind.
chores?
It was just chores. We had chores.
And these were your milk cows?
Yeah, definitely. They took the cream to Sabetha, the man. There was twice a week they'd come around and pick up your cream can, a big cream can, and take your cream to Sabetha, Kansas. And you got a cream check. And then my mom always had lots of layers and had hens, and we had eggs to sell when we went to town. Usually had enough to buy your groceries at least.
So what else do you remember growing up as a kid? What about family life? What was your family life like? What did you do for fun?
We were busy and worked, and I don't know, when I got to be a teenager, I got to go to dances at a Bohemian Hall. And it was a Bohemian Hall, Czech, which was near Du Bois.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I met your dad at a dance.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a lot of Czech dances. And some modern. And Du Bois had a big hall. They had dances too. And
Did you have fun growing up with your brothers and sisters? Did you? I haven't heard you ever talk
Well,
about
they were
that. I remember you talking about the chores and
they
stuff.
were somewhat younger, actually, in a way. You see. So they never were in the same grade or anything like that. So,
Right.
but and being the oldest, I had lots of chores to do. I would say. I know I helped Dad with the milking, and I know it helped. That really helped. And I didn't mind it too much as long as they didn't kick me. I put kickers on them. Did you know what a kicker is?
No.
Do you know what a kicker is? They're things that you put on their legs so they can't kick.
Oh.
Very good.
Well, they get them on there so that they can't really hit your head by any means. You put them on there and it has to stay and they can't kick.
Couple of pieces, clamps with it, and short chain in between.
If they could kick with both feet, then sometimes anyhow.
They worked pretty good for me.
Mm-hmm.
And if they were really bad, Dad had to do that. I didn't milk the really, really bad ones. He did. Because they could, like you say, kick your bucket of milk over after you had it milked.
That's
and
no good.
And that was sad.
I suppose so. Hmm.
But I didn't really mind the cows so much. I don't think it was a job to be done. And then my sister Joyce helped Mom with the chickens. That was she liked to do that. Clean out the brooder house. The brooder house is where you have the little ones.
Mm-hmm.
Chicken house is where you have the layers. And Mom did a good job, and it really helped with the finances to have those eggs to take to town. To buy your sugar and your flour and the things that you didn't grow because Mom always had a good garden and we canned a lot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I washed the jars to can the beans because my hand was smaller. And we had to put them on the stove with a boiler. And you boiled them 3 hours, isn't that right? Because we didn't have that thing that's, what do you call it
Didn't have
now?
a pressure canner.
Didn't have a pressure canner in those days.
Boil 'em on stove.
But we raised a lot of green beans and whatever else we could. The potatoes, always raised lots of potatoes if we could. I still think new potatoes are good too.
Tell me about going to school, Mom.
Well, I had to walk a mile to what they called the Rock School. It was a country school. And it was made out of rock. So they called it the Rock School. And it was a big country school. We had about 40 kids sometimes. And all grades. Not kindergarten. They didn't have kindergarten in those days. So the teachers were busy.
So you had more than one teacher?
No.
No, you just had one.
No. Nowadays they do have an aide. I don't think any. No, we never had the one teacher there.
Did you like school?
I surely did like school because we didn't have too many books at home. So probably a lot of people didn't. So then I probably had read all the books in the school. And then you could get them. And then when I got to high school, I could go to the library and get books. But in those days, the country school didn't have a whole lot of books. So reading was probably my most favorite subject. And arithmetic, my least favorite.
That's right.
And then when I went to high school, of course, I took home ec.
Mm-hmm.
I took all I could. I took the sewing and the cooking and the management or whatever it was called in those days. So I learned to sew. But I never made any clothes out of flour sacks, which some people have. If you know what a flour sack is, it's material.
Yeah, no,
And I have a few yet. But I did learn to sew. I had a good teacher that learned, and I did learn to make my own clothes. Most of my high school clothes, as a freshman, I had made skirts and blouses.
And this was in Seneca.
I went to high school in Seneca, graduated in Seneca. And then out of that, Seneca, I went to True, Nebraska, so I could teach. Because we had the normal training, but they cut that out about that time in Kansas. So I didn't get the normal training. That means I don't know what it was. You had some kind of a course in high school that you could go out and teach. Well, about the time I was ready to teach, and the Kansas school where I taught, Kansas decided you had to have a little high school or a little college. So I went to Peru, Nebraska for a year and a summer. So I could teach out in the country, and I did. I taught 2 years out in Kansas then.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that's all out now. You have to have 4 years, 6 years But I did have some college that way, just because some of them got a little stricter.
Mhm.
But a lot of people taught right out of high school at that time, what they call normal training. I don't know what normal training really means, but
Did you like being a teacher?
well, I only had 5 students. I had 2 third graders and 2 fourth graders, and that one year, 1 8th grader. So it wasn't tough. And I had a good school board. And the Rock School was a nice school, and I had, believe it or not, a lot of schools didn't have this. It had a basement, and it had a furnace in the basement. And the school board always had wood. We burned wood. But that was a little different than a lot of schools. Where I went to school as a kid, there's a big old stove in the back. And then you had to put the teacher had to keep firewood in it. But when I taught, there's a nice school that had the furnace in the basement. You had to put the wood in it, but still, that was a lot better than having it sit here in the back. And one place was really warm was by the stove. But the school I taught had the furnace. And that was kind of different. Actually, that was kind of update.
Yeah.
So I really didn't, and I didn't have a whole lot of, and they were all good, and I liked my school board. I really enjoyed it.
Well, let's back up a little bit. I want to hear what high school was like for you, because that must have been an adjustment after having just gone to a one-room school, basically.
Well,
what was it like going to high school after
The year I graduated, the buses started.
graduated from?
High school. When I graduated from the 8th grade, the buses started.
Okay.
And I was actually in the burn district, but some way or another, I got to walk a mile up to the Rock School where I had gone to school, take the bus and go into Seneca.
About how far was that? Approximately just.
Well, Seneca was probably, I don't know, 15, 20 miles or so from the Rock School.
Mm-hmm.
And then I came home on the bus and had to walk. So I walked a mile for a good many years, just added up.
Mm-hmm.
8 years and 4.
Mm-hmm.
What does that make it?
Mm-hmm.
And someone told me that's probably the reason my legs and I'm pretty healthy. I walked a lot.
True. So what was it like then going to high school?
Well, it was nice because I met more people, and I liked taking the home ec things, because her mother had died young. My mother had never learned to use a sewing machine. She could crochet and embroider, but she didn't know a thing about using a pattern at all. So I was lucky I learned that in high school from a good 3 years of home ec.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did take typing, which after years gone by, I decided to work in the extension office for how many years was that? Quite a few, and I was the secretary, and I had to type. So it's a good thing I got my typing.
Right.
And I still type all my letters, as you well know.
Mm-hmm. How many women do you think, that you went to high school with got to go to college and had, careers other than keeping house and raising children? Do you know?
Probably
in that day and age?
not near all of them. A lot of them got married and raised kids. Yeah, that's what they did. They lived on the farm. They had work to do there.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them, if they lived on the farm, there was plenty to do. So, but I was kind of lucky because I got over to Peru and was able to teach. And I had taken the typing in school, so I could be a secretary. And sometimes I was a little more than a secretary because our agents had to go to meetings. And I was left alone to run the office and pass out the bulletins and try to help people that came in the office.
Right. Was it hard coming up with the money to go to college then?
I imagine it really was.
Did Grandma and Grandpa pay for that? Or?
Yes, and then but my uncle Dick, who had help from his uncle Baird, paid for some of my what do you call it at high school, college or tuition. So he helped with some of the tuition, so I could, because he had help from Uncle John, and that's how we did it. Uncle John, he gave Richard money, and then Richard gave me money for the tuition. Of course, it probably wasn't near what the price of it is now.
Probably not.
And of course, Peru is a teacher's college, and it's not as expensive as your.
And you lived on campus. Where did you live when you went to Peru? Did you live in the dormitory?
Yes, we had a I lived in the dormitory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I lived in the dormitory, which was kind of
That
different.
must have been fun.
That was different, and I met more people.
Did you have a roommate?
I had a roommate, Harriet. I don't remember what her last name is, and she married, but she's gone. Just rather recently, she died. And she did come back to Pawnee City once to visit me.
Did you do stuff on campus? Did you get,
I was in
do any activities on campus?
I was in a play once.
You were? What was the play?
I can't tell you any more much about it. I didn't have a very big part, but they had a play. They had a play, and it wasn't a big part, but I was in a play, because I had been in several plays. In country school, we put on plays, but there were a lot of them. Now, I was in a play at Peru once. The teacher, one of the teachers also did the plays.
Was the director.
Was the director, yes. So I didn't have a big part, but I did. I was in one of the, they had a play every fall and spring, I think, or something. I was in a play once, which was pretty good for some kid, just freshmen to get a part. But I had been in plays at the Old Rock School. I had been in plays too. They used to put on, people had to have something for diversion. They didn't have television then.
Right.
And some of them not even radios. I can remember the first radio we got. So the schools were pretty good to put on different. We had our last day program always, You'd speak pieces and
Sure.
sing and all that kind of stuff. And our school was big because we had 40 kids, and so we could do a pretty good job. We had every grade.
When you're in country school.
Country school, so. And then I think Seneca was pretty big too, because the superintendent, you got more money for kids, every kid from the state. So there was a bus that came in from down at Summerfield around, and then the one that I rode on, which he started at just from our place, it would have been about 5 or 6 miles. And then we had some kids that went to the Catholic school that rode that bus. And I've never known until many people have asked me if they paid something to ride that bus. If they got on the bus and went on over to the Catholic school in Seneca. Maybe they did. I don't know. And maybe they didn't have to, but there was a lot of kids on a school bus to go to school. And then they had brought in the bus from the other side of town too.
Yeah.
So the high school in Seneca really improved and really had a lot more kids when all the kids got there from the country. And they didn't have lunches to eat. You had to take your lunch yet. They weren't into that lunches thing.
Right, so you had to take your own lunch.
We took our own lunch then too.
Okay.
Which now you wouldn't have to. They'd have the lunchroom.
Hey, Karen had another question. Was this about Russell?
No, Grandpa Warrick's other brothers and sisters.
Well, we talked about that.
Did we talk about the
Russell
girls?
and Ruth and Lillian.
Those are Grandma's sisters, Ruth and...
No.
No.
No, Mom, they both had.
They both
Oh,
had.
I'm sorry, I missed the Ruth.
Dad had
part,
a sister
I
named
guess.
Ruth, and so did Mom.
Isn't
Yeah.
that Ethel too?
Ethel.
Oh, I'm sorry, I must have
John.
missed, somewhere I missed something.
Yeah, and John.
Wait. We're getting confused here.
Yeah.
Warrick.
Cut.
We're on the Warrick side of the family.
Oh, well, then that was Ruth and.
Oaths siblings.
Yeah,
Who
that
were
would-
Oath siblings?
Well, that would have been Russ, and he had Ruth and Ethel, John, and
Lily.
Lillian. Yeah.
I think we miss Ethel and John.
I thought
The first time around.
something was missing.
Yeah, Ethel.
Okay.
Oh, there was Cora too.
Cora, yeah.
Cora. She married a Heseltine. She lived in Sabetha.
Okay. Okay. So how you doing? You want to take a break or?
I don't know how am I doing.
Good,
Good.
really good.
Do you want to talk about meeting Dad?
Well, I met your dad at the dance. The Czech Hall in a little ways out of Du Bois.
How old were you?
Well, I would have been at least 18. About. And, he was a good dancer. He's one of the best dancers out there. But everybody was good dancers out there. They were good dancers. No fools, they were.
Right.
Kids were good dancers. And the music was good. We went to lots of dances.
Okay. So you were 18. He was what, about 21?
Yeah, he was about 4 years older, I think.
4 years. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
no.
And so, how long had you known him then before you got married? You remember? How old were you when you got married? Let's put it that way.
Well, I wasn't too old. I was old enough.
Well, had you gone to Peru and started teaching?
Oh, yeah, I had done
by
all
that
that.
time.
Oh,
So you're
definitely.
probably what?
Oh, yeah.
At least 20 or so.
Oh, I had done all that, yes.
Okay. So then you moved to Pawnee City.
Yeah. There's one thing I would like to be sure you know. Back up a little bit. When I went to get my driver's license in Seneca, my dad said she can drive, and they gave me my license. And I have never had to drive yet.
Wow.
They could anytime. When you go now, they could ask you to drive.
Mm-hmm.
You have to take the test.
But in that day and age, they just vouch for you.
Dad just said she can drive.
How did you learn to drive?
Dad taught me.
What did you learn to drive on?
An old 38 Chevy. I mean the 38 Chevy. It
Yeah.
didn't have much speed. It was a good car for a kid to learn to drive because it didn't have much go. You know, it didn't just take right off. It was a good kid.
And your dad had to teach you to drive because I recall Grandma
Now, Grandma never drove.
never learned to drive.
Never learned.
Mm-hmm. So how old were you then? Was it 16 then
I
still?
think so.
Or
Yeah, I think so.
when did you get a license?
I think you had to be there to get a license.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know when they started this bit of letting a kid drive earlier if they drove to school. They maybe could get it a little younger, but I know I probably had to be 16. But it still sticks in my mind that I could just get a license. Dad said I could drive. You guys had to take that driver and get out and drive. And see, I've never had to do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when I go get my license, I kind of shake because they can still ask you to drive. Mine's good until 85. Maybe I won't ever need another one.
That's a goal. Never have to drive for your driver's license.
Well, now which one of you kids went over and got your license and didn't tell us you were going to go get
That
it?
was me.
You come back home and said, I got my driver's
That
license.
was me.
And I didn't even know you were going to go get it.
I illegally drove the car down
Well,
to the
yes.
courthouse.
Oh.
Unaccompanied.
She drove it over to get her license illegally. Her driver and got it, and didn't tell her folks, and came home and said, I got my driver's license.
Probably the most rebellious thing I've done in my whole life. Wow. Okay, so you married Dad and moved to Pawnee. And that must have been what? What year was that? Like 41? You were
Well,
born in 42.
yeah, that'd be somewhat right. What year were you born?
42.
Of course, now Dad was in World War II, you know.
Yeah, how long were you married before Dad left for the war?
Not too long then. When he had to go to service.
Mm-hmm. And when were you married? I'm sitting there going, my God, I can't remember your anniversary. What month were you married in? Your first wedding anniversary. I don't remember. Well, they're not paying attention. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. That's okay. That's okay. So, what was Dad's occupation then when you got married? What was he doing?
He worked at a filling station, and he was a mechanic.
And where were you married?
We drove over to, look at my license, drove someplace in Nebraska,
Plattsmouth?
Tecumseh to minister who had been at, that Dawn had known, so we drove over there and got married.
Just the two of you?
No, we had to have a friend.
Witnesses?
We had Irma Corber, my good friend, and a good friend of Bill, Don's drove up from Kansas City, I believe.
Do you remember who that was?
Can't right off say his
Yeah,
name
it's
anymore. It's been, because I never knew him very well anyway. I never saw much of him. He did. I know he's gone. Irma's gone too now.
Yeah. Yeah.
We drove over there.
So anyway, so what was Dad doing then? What was his occupation when you got married?
Well, he was a mechanic. And then he finally bought this filling station. A filling station. And
So did you live with Grandma and Grandpa Glenn then right away, or just when he went and left for the war?
I had to stay there when he went to war, yes, definitely. And those were kind of bad times. But as you know, something happened to the letters that he sent back.
And you were pregnant with Karen when he left.
Yes. But Grandma Glenn was there when Karen was born.
What happened to the letters?
I don't know. We can't find them.
What? No, they're in that same. They're in that box, that lockbox.
Well, maybe they still are. I'll have to look then.
I don't. That's where I saw them when Dad died.
But he sent a lot of letters home.
Yeah, I think they're there.
Maybe
I think
are.
they should. They should still be there, Mom.
But
I don't have them.
That was a bad time for all us. Lots of us. Lots of us.
Mm-hmm.
We're having babies and we're gone. And it was a bad time. But we were lucky, some of them. And then later, his brother had to go too. Raymond Glenn had to go to service too. Then
What did Dad do? What was his in the war?
I know what he did. He was in the Air Corps, and he never got to fly. But he worked on the engines. He worked to keep the airplanes running. That's what he did because he'd been a mechanic.
And he
But
was
he would like-
stationed in Arizona.
Yeah.
I think.
But he would like to have been a pilot. But he
But
never had the
He
chance.
had what, 2 discs in his back that were fused together?
Well, yes, he did, but I don't think that kept him from being a flyer.
Oh, I thought it was.
Yeah, well, maybe it was. I don't know. There was something that it kept him from getting to be a pilot.
That's what I always thought.
I never heard this in my life.
I don't
What
know.
had happened to
4F
him?
or whatever it is.
What had happened to him?
I think it was
Caused
just
a
a
back
natural.
injury.
I mean, I don't think it's an injury. He just happened to have 2 discs in his back that
Oh,
were
it
fused
was
together,
just
and
a-
that was enough to keep him from
Genetic
flying in the
thing.
South Pacific.
Oh, I guess I had never heard that.
So Benny did, but he worked on the airplanes and
So he never went overseas, though, which was a relief.
right because Raymond went overseas. Yeah,
So at
his
least you knew he was.
brother. Yeah, he was there. He was in the States.
So then Karen was born, but he didn't see her
no, he couldn't
for until how long?
until he came home.
She was about what, 2?
I imagine. He didn't get to come home when she was born either. They didn't do it. He was in the war was on, and you just didn't do things like that.
Did you get to talk to him? Did you get to talk to him on the phone?
Once in a while, got lots of letters and lots of. I stayed with his folks. Karen was there, and there were quite a few people in town, quite a few other mothers in town in the same boat as I was. That's the way it was during the World War II.
Mm-hmm.
What you could do about
So
it.
what was it like? I know you've told us lots of stories about living with Grandma and Grandpa Glenn and living in their household.
Well, they had a big house, and they lived in the house that belonged to a man named Dort, D-O-R-T. But she cooked for him, got his meals, took care of his washing. He had a room upstairs. They had the bedroom downstairs, and that took care of their rent. All the time.
Just taking care of him.
That's right, because he was by himself, and he was quite an elderly man. He was a lawyer. Had an office downtown. And so I had a room then, and Karen had to climb the stairs. She was just big enough to kind of get up those stairs, and afraid she'd fall back down because they had a big room with a long stairway, But from what Orpha said, and Ralph, my being there and you being there helped them during the war with their sons gone. As you could understand, it probably did. That was a really tough time. There's no way you can understand unless you go through it. It was war.
Where was Raymond and where was he stationed?
Well, he went
his
later.
Experience.
And he was overseas. He was overseas then.
He was in Germany, I think.
Yeah, I believe he was in Germany then. Because he wasn't married at that time. He and Mary Ellen were writing to each other, but they weren't married, no. That's right, they had 2 sons then.
And I remember, don't I remember something about Raymond being in a huge battle, and he was one of only about 4 out of his
Well, he
regiment
was-
who came back alive?
He was before you had to walk, what do you call it?
Infantry.
Infantry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was. Of course, he was quite a
And
bit.
like the vast majority of his unit was killed,
Yes, he was.
and
Definitely.
he was one of only a handful who
I
came
think
back
so.
alive.
But he was going with Mary Ellen at that time, though, too. But in real fact, I think they met at the dance at Du Bois also. Those were tough times, those war years,
Mm-hmm.
because
Well, that must have been pretty scary having a baby and
yeah, it
being
was.
alone and
It was.
living with your in-laws.
But I was
and-
lucky to have somebody to live with, and once in a while I could go down and stay with my folks. But not, I wasn't too. Gas was rationed. You just didn't get out and drive when you wanted to, during those years. You just got so much gas, and so I couldn't be running down there very often. Once in a while, I did go down there with Karen. She probably couldn't remember because she was small. But once in a while I got to go. And Grandma Warrick,
Glenn.
Arthur would say, I don't know why she had to go down there and take that kid with her. She didn't like it when I took you away. Went down to, for a couple of weeks. I ought to stay there. Because they certainly did. Well, it was good because their kids were gone in the war and it was something else to think
What
about.
else do you remember about what Grandma Glenn was like?
She was very fastidious. Do you know what that word means?
Yes.
Yes.
In her dress, in her house, and they ran a, what do you call it? When you
Tight
take-
ship.
she worked downtown in the afternoon.
Produce store.
A produce station where you took in eggs and cream. And she wrote out the checks to the people.
And
And she
probably
probably
did all
did-
the bookkeeping and
And did the bookkeeping, yes. And Sabetha Creamery owned the place in Pawnee City. But her housekeeping was just up to dang in what she dressed, and she dressed nice. And she was, I think that's a good word, fastidious. I don't know what.
Was that kind of tough living in another woman's household and, having not been married to her son very long and then he leaves and was that stressful?
Most of the only stress was having him gone and it was war. Otherwise, Ralph
You had a good relationship
Ralph
with her and
and Orpha were great. Yes, they were both. I couldn't complain about it.
And she spoiled me and let me make messes too.
Yeah,
I
she
recall.
probably spoiled Karen.
She would let me get stuff out of her kitchen cupboard and take it outside and mix stuff together.
uh-huh.
But she had-
Very unlike her, as you say.
Yeah.
She had just had the 2 boys. She never had
Outward was outdoors probably.
She had never had a girl. She had just the 2 boys. So
2 onward boys
And she
too.
taught me to do embroidery and
that's right, she did. She was an old-fashioned, and learned all these things.
I remember watching her put on her corset and lacing it up in the back.
That's right, she wore a corset.
Yeah.
Do you know what a corset is?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
People I don't think would anymore.
Yeah. And tell me about Grandpa Glenn.
Well, he
Living with him.
ran the filling station, and he just kind of did what Orpha
Train
said.
station.
Cream station. No, well, he probably did just
Say that again. What did Grandpa do?
probably did what Orpha said. No kidding. He really was. He was great. But then during wartime it was a little different. People who've never experienced that can't really know what it's like to have someone you gone and you're worrying about it and will they get, because every once in a while somebody you knew got the letter, they were gone. And I had a friend and several friends whose husbands were gone. Grace, whatever her name, Menchow, no, another Grace. And but your dad wrote all those letters. He was good at writing letters, and most of them people, we did do a lot of letter writing in those days. But it was stressful.
Mhm.
And I'm sure anybody that has somebody in their service now overseas, it's still stressful. Has to be, even though we're not really at war, are we?
Well, not technically, but that's debatable.
That's the question, isn't it? If you have somebody over there,
How are we doing on tape?
Fine.
so
What was Karen like growing up?
well, she was always good, bright,
Perfect.
did well in school, and she was really quite, for that during that time, it was nice to have a youngster probably in the home with the stress we were thinking about the war. It took some of the stress away to have, and there were a lot of us in the same boat. I had several friends in the same thing, and we'd talk and visit about it. And it made, like I said, Grandma didn't like it when I took her down to the other grandma's place. And we did go down there. We went down to the farm once in a while. And Karen, you liked the farm.
Yeah.
Karen liked the farm. Because
Nice place to visit.
Mom had chickens and Dad had cows, and it was different than living right in town. So,
Tom was noticing here that Grandma Glenn's mother died fairly young
Yeah.
also.
she did.
Do you remember them, either Grandpa or Grandma talking about their parents?
No, I really don't. I really don't. Can't. They would have died. I sure don't. Now, wait a minute. Take that back.
Well, no,
Ralph
that's not a Grandma Glenn's
Wait a minute,
mother
Ralph's
was
mother-
alive.
was alive, and they finally had to put her in Lincoln in the, what's the name of that place in Lincoln? Where they take people.
West Lincoln.
Lancaster Manor?
No,
it's
no.
in West Lincoln.
Insane asylum?
No,
It
no.
kind of was. I mean, it was
Yeah,
Well,
kinda
that's
that.
sort of a state home kind of.
State home.
Right.
They called it a state home.
Kind
She had-
dementia or something.
But she was
Mental?
up in years, and she just couldn't manage it at home. They had to take her. That's right. She was up there for I don't know how long, but we made quite a few trips to Lincoln to see her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Do
we
you
did.
remember them talking about Grandpa had a twin brother and sister, didn't he, that died young?
I guess so.
Yes.
Do you
Young,
remember anything about that?
No, I really don't.
I thought I remember being told that they died of the flu.
That was
Big
Lucy
flu.
and somebody, wasn't
Flu
it?
epidemic.
Lucy and Charles.
And didn't they call
Peanuts.
Grandma Ralph's mother Bertie?
Yes, that's what I've heard.
That wasn't her name though.
Bertie Ashley. Her name is Margaret.
Yeah, called her Bertie.
Mm.
Yes, we did make trips to this. Called the state home. Is that what they call it? Yeah,
I thought that's what they called
Yeah.
it at the time.
I think so. And I think the government probably helped with the. Well, I'm sure. Maybe they did it all.
Mm.
So, what was it like when your husband came back from the war? When you got to see Karen for the first time, what was that like?
Well, I imagine it should have been quite. Because he's not the only father who came back like that, and saw. But I imagine it was quite. I don't know. Had to have been quite the thing to
Do
do.
you remember what it
Did
was
you
like?
meet him
What
at
were
the
the
train?
circumstances?
We went to Lincoln to pick him up off of the. He came in on the train. We went. Ralph and Orphan and myself, and we took Grace. Grace Minshaw was teaching in Pawnee City. She lived in a little town out of Lincoln a little ways. And so some way we called each other, and she'd gone home for the weekend, and we brought her home too. And the real interesting thing behind it, we three sat in the front. Orphan, Grandma and Grandpa sat in the back. And Grace said, "He's cute." She whispered to me about your dad. And and it just happened that she had gone home but was coming back to teach, because we'd known each other at Peru, see, real well, good friend. And she was coming back from some little town right out of Lincoln a little way. She was coming back, and so Don was getting off the train. So some way, we picked him up and picked Grace up too, and we all came home. And because Grace had been I'd roomed with her one summer, I think, over at Peru. And she was a very lively lady. Don never wants me to say gal, but sometimes that's the only word that for. She was intelligent and full of fun, just a great person. And it was really nice to have her, to get to know her for a while. But
So Dad must have been pretty tickled to see you and Karen.
He should have been, I think. I think he was. I'm sure he
Well, I
was.
remember having been told later on that he was exceptionally thrilled when Kathy was coming along because he had missed out on those early years.
Right, that's right. Well, sure. There you
He
go.
had another chance to experience
There you
those-
go. That's right. Even though
20 years older, though.
Even though it was 20 years, even though it was 20 years later.
Yeah.
They're 20 years apart. But you can't tell it now, can you?
That's right. No.
No, you can't.
No.
So how did you find out about Kathy? When you were pregnant with her?
Yeah, tell that story.
Well, just one of those things that happened. That's all I know.
That's what Ralph said.
Yeah, but I thought that they were worried that you had cancer or early menopause, or weren't
Well-
they ruling out everything else?
Well, I just went to the doctor, and he just said, "Well, now you might be pregnant." And I finally that he admitted that I was, yes. And I must admit, that you had an easier time with the second one than I did the first. I really did. Which is just one of those things, I guess. I really did.
But I thought for sure you told me once that they were afraid you had cancer, or
Well, they might have. I don't know about that.
because it was fairly unusual.
Yeah, it was.
Then,
It kind of was.
then, especially not having any kids in between.
Yeah.
You know. So.
But it's worked. It worked out very well.
So far. So far, so good.
I didn't say so far. I just said it really worked out well.
So what did you and Don do for fun after he came back?
We did a lot of dancing. They had the good Czech dancing out at the Czech Hall.
I remember you playing cards with friends.
Yeah, we played cards. We belonged to
Who were some of your friends?
well, Dorothy and Lyle Farwell was in the group that played cards.
Do you have got like a card club or something, or just informal?
No, there were about 4 couples we get together. I can't just remember everybody, but Dorothy and Lyle, of course, were the ones that we played cards a lot. And we did a lot of things with Dorothy and Lyle then. We went to dances there. Years later, after the kids were raised and all that.
The Westermans.
The Westermans, yeah, Lyle Westermans.
How about the Kaisers?
Yeah, we went out. The Kaiser didn't dance all of them because he played in the band.
Oh,
Kaiser played in, what's his name? The guy with the accordion.
Lad Tragic.
Lad Tressic's band. Kaiser played in the band, so they didn't. She just had to go and sit because that's who. That was the Tressic band. They played modern and Czech. Yeah, we played cards with the Kaisers. Yeah, and then and we went to dances in Senegan later years and didn't get home till 4:00 in the morning. Of course, we stopped and ate on the way home at Beatrice.
Good
Went to a lot of
Lord.
good dances up here. They had some good orchestras. Really did. And we
I
danced
remember
a lot.
you saying that Lyle Farwell had a way of going to sleep while he was driving home late at night.
Yeah, we had to stop him and let Don do the driving. Don would just say, "Hey, stop, I'll do the driving now." But, and I hadn't really known them until later years. I knew of them, but I didn't. Dorothy was a good friend of Mary Ellen Raymond's. They went to high school in Du Bois together at about the same year. I bet they graduated the same year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we went to a lot of dances. A lot of people did. They had good dances right in Du Bois. And then they had the dances out to the Czech Hall out south of town in the country. And it was a Czech Hall. It was a lodge. Well, we even had a lodge. It was a lodge.
The
And then
ZCBJ.
and they put on the dances to make money, and they imagine they did.
Mm-hmm.
And I never was outside drinking. I was always inside dancing.
Which is of note because the hall
Right.
had quite a reputation
That's
for
right.
what went on outside the hall
Uh-huh.
during the dance.
That's right.
I think so.
Outside.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Don have any hobbies? Anything you like to do when you got home? Besides dance? Or is that it? You like cars or?
Well, you see, he was
always a
a
gearhead.
mechanic. A what?
A gearhead. That's somebody who likes cars.
Well, he was a mechanic, and so of course he did like to fool around with the cars. Definitely, that's kind of his thing with the cars. And he had never gone to school. He learned it all by being there and doing it. He
Tom
worked in
said
the.
he liked to take pictures.
Well, yeah, he did have the camera then, and he had.
There's a lot of slides. We had a lot of slides.
But he worked in the Ford garage for a while and helped. He didn't sell cars, but he did
He
everything
was the
but sell.
parts man.
Parts
Parts
man.
man.
He was a parts man. He did that for a while before he bought the filling station. Now, the Prairies owned a. Am I right? Owned the Ford garage. One of them. I think he worked for them, and he was the parts man. Yeah, he ordered him and got him ready and see that people hadn't. And then later he was a mechanic too, and he did like cars. And he, knew about cars, liked cars. But then a lot of people nowadays, I think, maybe did like cars.
Did you like Tom?
I don't know.
Oh, for heaven's sakes.
You don't know.
Well, let's talk about this. When, Karen wanted to get married at a pretty young age, and Dad had some pretty firm opinions, didn't he, about,
everything.
yeah. Didn't he have, about Karen making sure she went to college before she got married and all those kind of things?
I guess so, but
That's what I remember
I
you
guess
telling me. I wasn't around.
I guess we overcome it anyway. Whatever.
Well, I thought you said that.
'Cause I think Don felt cheated because he never got to go to college. I definitely think he
I think
did.
that's true.
A lot of people probably
Definitely.
didn't think about that, but I think he really did.
As I recall it, from my point of view, you're right. That it was okay if I got married, but I had to finish college.
Yeah,
Nothing
right.
was going to stand
That's
in the
what
way
I
of
remember.
finishing
That you could
college.
get it's okay if you got engaged, but you didn't want you getting married
You were going to.
until you were gonna finish or something.
Because he always felt like he'd been cheated.
Well, and certainly it didn't seem like his kids had any choice. Going to college was your
Well-
only option, right?
That's the way I saw it.
He was adamant about me
Well,
and Karen going to
At
college.
that time, probably, especially with Karen, it was the only way you could kind of get up to get a little more money because he'd been although it wasn't anything about being a mechanic, and he was a good mechanic, I know that, with the cars. But you didn't make a lot of money in those days doing that.
Right.
The only people that made a little more money was if you got a degree.
Hmm.
I don't know whether people still believe that way or not, that you need to get a degree.
I think so.
I imagine they
Many
do.
do. Many people do. Yeah.
And I was just lucky that Uncle Dick helped me, and I got to go to Peru, and,
Mhm.
and got some college so I could teach.
Mhm.
And I don't think that I worked in the extension office for a good many years, and I don't think my college hurt anything than having, I sure had taken my typing in high school, and
Right.
I learned a lot there. I learned a lot from all my agents. And, but I ran the office when the agent wasn't there. They were always going to Lincoln to a meeting, and I ran the office.
Mhm.
And I must say that I enjoyed the work. I enjoyed working with the people. And the 4-H kids, and the Home Extension Club. I enjoyed that.
Dad liked working with people too.
Yes, he
He
definitely
liked the
worked with
station because the people would come in and he could
There's no doubt about
strike
that.
up a conversation and
Mhm.
enjoy
He did.
talking
He liked
to
working with
everybody.
If you didn't like working with people, you wouldn't be in some of those kind of work. That kind of work.
Yeah.
And I was lucky because, let's see, I had 5 different bosses. If you want to hear about them.
I bet you could tick off lots of things about them.
Well, I learned something from all of them. My first boss was Mr. Hauser, and he had been an English teacher in a high school, someplace in Nebraska. And so I never changed anything that he wrote. He didn't dictate too much,
Wrote his own stuff.
yeah. But then later some of the agents would say, now this is what we want to tell him, this is what we want to know, you can go ahead and do it. And then I had I better not say this, I had the fellow from Oklahoma, who was interesting. And he just let me do it. Then I had Ted Nelson, who was very good at dictating. And then I had Dwayne DeLuigi, all good agents and easy to get along with.
How did you end up with that job, Mom? How
Well,
did you find out about that job and get that job?
Karen had the friend Charlene Haverkamp was down there, and she left to get married, and
This.
so I went down and applied. Now Charlene was
I
there.
remember her being there first. Boy, that's something I
Well, she was there
completely forgot.
either first or in the area there sometime. Yeah, she did. I think it was when she quit and got married, and I went down.
So how did you know you wanted this job?
You
What-
didn't work there before Charlene? Did you take time off when Kathy was born?
Oh, maybe I did take a little time off. Then Charlene came, and then she left, and I went
I
back.
think
Yeah,
you
you're
were
right.
before
I took
Charlene.
some time off when you were born.
So how did you find out about the job in the first place? I mean, do you remember what? How did you know that
Well, we
you
would
might
just-
want to work there in the first place, even before I was born?
The
Everything.
The best answer is we needed the money. We needed a lot of mothers and had second jobs about that time because things were kind of not in. And so I just went down and applied, and I was there a good long time, and I enjoyed it. I liked it. You are working with people coming in and wanting this and wanting that. And I was lucky I had some good county agents, actually. Now, Don Sherrill was the fellow from Oklahoma. He was kind of different because, and this is good, one day he told somebody that I wore out my shoes because I climbed too many trees. But that doesn't mean he was dumb. That's just the way they talked in Oklahoma. But that kind of got me when he said that. I climbed too many trees. But he was, and he had a nice little short wife who was real nice.
Well, I remember those days when I was a kid when your office was down below the post office.
That's right.
And I was telling Kurt the other day, I remember sitting in that break room. It was
Yes.
a break room.
Mhm.
And the guys from the post office would come down, and you'd all sit in that break room, and there were one of those guys who put peanuts in his Pepsi.
Yep, that's right.
Who was that?
I don't know which one that was. Yeah, they did.
But you had kind of, you didn't really have a lot of coworkers in the office, but you had the
No, I
guys
had
in the
said that
post
little
office.
one. We could go over and have something in there where the SES office was
Right.
in the very back part of the
They had
SES.
several people who worked in there.
Break room was the old
Right.
coal room.
Right.
Well, yes, you're right. That was where the coal room,
Mhm.
and then later when we moved downtown to our own office,
Right.
well, then we had a nice.
The only other thing I remember I remember running up the steps and turning the corner and falling down.
Oh, you mean at
Smashing
the post
my knee
office?
once.
Yeah. We were in the basement,
Yeah. Yeah, we had to go down those steps and then go back up.
and then when we moved uptown, we were right downtown. That was
Mm-hmm.
we probably had a few more people come in then. There
Right.
weren't any steps, but I didn't. It was a nice big office then because the other office was quite small. We were clear at the back, and
Yeah.
there was just barely room for the two big desks.
Mm-hmm.
About all there was.
Right. Do you remember how much you made when you started that job? Yep. Do you remember it all? Like how much you made per hour?
I can tell you what I made when I first started to teach. When I was teaching out
Okay.
there, I can tell you that I made $50 a month.
Okay.
55 the next month,
Right.
next year.
But you don't remember how much?
No,
you
I
made?
don't. I couldn't tell you that
Per
exactly,
hour?
but it was a lot more than that. Well, I was up to
Let me
the
tell you what I made the first year.
probably a lot more per hour than I got. By then, I think you had to pay a certain amount,
Mhm.
didn't you?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. the
Yeah. By
minimum
that time, it had to be the
wage.
minimum, whatever
But
that.
I would, it seems though, Mom, the kind of job that you had was probably a pretty decent job in
It was.
Pawnee.
It was.
Oh, yeah.
It was.
Stable, better than,
Oh, definitely.
it was a good office job,
So it was,
basically.
I can't tell you, but it was a lot more than
Right.
when I first
What
started.
I remember too is you worked at the county fair. A lot.
Well,
of
yes,
years.
because all of our kids had to go up there and help you.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get any extra money for any of that either.
What are the kind of things that you did up there when you helped with the fair?
Well, the first thing we did was had to get they'd come in and get what they were going to display and get that all typed up so they could take it up there and put it on their garment or on the booth, or all that had to be done. Sometimes you could give it to them and they could do it, but usually they had to have some help. You had to have that put that on your garment, on your food,
Your entry tags.
your entry tags, yeah.
And then you had to work up there.
And then I'd go up there and help and just stay there. Somebody was in that building. You never
basically
left,
just keep an eye on all
you
the
never
entries.
left that. But our 4-H leaders came and took their turn too. Yeah, that was a big day, lot of work at the county fairs.
Didn't you help people with their income tax at the office too for a while?
Yes, we did help. We did help people with their income tax too, mostly farmers. But we had a book, and our county agent went to about 2 or 3 day school in Lincoln.
So they were kind of the tax assistants.
Yeah, and to learn, and came back with it.
Mm-hmm.
But of course,
Tom says requirements were simpler then.
well,
Probably so.
you had to fill out those forms, and a lot of farmers had no experience much of filling out a form. Putting it. So we did they have it kind of filled out. We pass out these. We ordered a lot of forms so they could take one home and get it kind of ready and then bring it in, and then we kind of fix it for them to mail in. But the agent went to the training meetings and brought back how to do tax forms, and I don't know how many other offices ever did that or not, but our extension office did do that. I'd forgotten about that. Yeah, we were pretty busy about that time in January.
So what was it like, you and Don becoming grandparents? How did you guys like that? What did you think of that?
We just thought it happened. I think that's about the answer I know.
That's Grandpa Glenn's famous line.
These things
the map
happen.
is on the way.
Yeah.
Well, these things happen.
Yeah, I think that's kind
Yes.
of what.
Did Don enjoy the kids, the grandkids?
Oh, I'm sure he did what he did, because he had cousins and so people that lived in Beatrice, and I know he enjoyed all those old and younger people too. So I'm sure he did. Of course.
Did Don ever have any close relationship to his half cousin that lived down south of Sabetha? Died the same year he did?
Not very. No,
Okay.
knew who they were. That's about it. I know who you mean, but he didn't.
What did Don pass away from?
Oh, how long has it been?
1983.
That's close. Yeah,
20 years.
yeah, that's right. It would have been.
He had colon cancer that
Colorectal
spread to the
cancer.
liver.
Yeah, I had colon cancer. Couldn't do anything about it. I don't think they can yet.
Well, yes, nowadays you can have
It was too far
a
gone.
screening test to prevent.
At that point,
to
he
help prevent
was fairly sick by the time.
At
Yeah,
that
he
point, they didn't know about that. That time, unfortunately.
What do you think? Want to take a break?
I don't know, what else would you like to know? I think of anything
Well, if
really
you want
interesting.
like medical history, Grandpa Warrick died of a stroke
Yeah, yeah, he
I
did.
was about a junior in high school.
at about,
he
he
did.
was not too old, about
No.
70,
Yeah, 70 something.
Right.
I think.
Most my mom lived to be
Grandma
almost.
Warrick died of old age at
Mom was almost
98.
99. Not quite.
You couldn't say she died of anything except
No.
old age.
Yeah, she's almost 99.
And Grandma Glenn had heart failure.
Yeah,
Just
she
She
did.
had heart
failure
trouble.
in her
Yeah.
60s.
Yeah, she
And
did.
Grandpa Glenn then also died of a heart attack, didn't he?
Or a stroke, he was 81.
Or a stroke. Yeah, he did.
I think
I
your
don't-
grandfather was
I don't remember whether it a heart attack or a stroke.
79.
Yeah, hard to tell. Yeah.
I can remember as a little kid, Dad taking it real hard when Grandpa Glenn
Yeah.
died.
They always struck me as being quite alike in personality, Grandpa and Dad. Did you think that too, Mom?
Now, what grandpa are you talking
Grandpa
about?
Glenn.
Dad and his dad.
Ralph.
Yes, I expect you could say that. You probably could say that.
Kind of emotional and kind of wore their heart on a sleeve.
Sentimental and
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
outgoing.
you're right.
Yeah.
So your first husband passed away in '83, and then when did you remarry?
86.
April of 86.
86.
And who did you marry?
This is the test.
Speaking of
Yes, tell
scallywags.
that story, Mom. It's a good story.
Well,
Tell us how you ended up.
Bill
It's a
Sausser.
great story.
Bill Sausser and I graduated together in Seneca. We were in the same grade, even though I rode the bus and he lived in town. We graduated the same year. Bill took me to the prom, maybe 2 proms. You know what a prom is, I hope.
Yeah.
Do they call them proms anymore?
Yeah.
Okay. And then after Dawn was gone, and I knew that Bill had come back to Seneca because he was divorced. He was at home. And I talked to somebody from Seneca. I can't think who it was anymore. I said, when you, oh, it was Irma Corber, my good friend, who by that time was in Seneca. I said, when you go back home, give Bill a ring. I don't think I told her anything else, but he called me, and next night he was there. And that was it. So, we were both alone, and Bill didn't have any children. He had married a girl from Seneca, and had moved to Colorado. He doesn't have any children. But he has Helen, his sister, and Betsy, his sister, and he has a brother, Georgie, who's in a home down at Osage City, Kansas, who just can't manage by himself. Although, Bill calls him on the phone, and he can't talk to him. We go down there, and Georgie will say, I got your letter. And Bill puts $1 in all these letters because their mother always sent Georgie a letter and a dollar bill. So Bill still does that every week.
So you basically married your high school sweetheart 40
That's right.
years later.
That's right. That's right. We're both alone.
And you'd lost touch with Bill over those years, I assume.
Well, because he lived in Colorado, for one thing. I knew of his family because they were from the Saussers. We're from Seneca, you see.
And he had come home back to Seneca to basically take care of his mother, who was
Yeah,
quite elderly.
That's what he was doing, yeah. He was taking care of
And Maggie lived to what, 100 and
almost 100.
Oh, almost 100.
Yeah,
Yeah.
almost 100. Yeah, she did. She really did. Of course, she was had always been crippled. She'd fallen as a youngster. And if it happened now, they would have taken her someplace and fixed that leg. Back then,
She probably needed surgery or something.
Yeah.
She never got it.
So then
It never
she was-
healed right.
so then she was always crippled and had a cane. But I'm sure now if that would happen, even how many years later, it would have been taken care of and you wouldn't have been crippled. She had to use a cane.
And Bill's father was a mason, right? A brick mason?
Yeah, I'm a brick mason. Not a, you know what I mean by a mason.
It's not son of
Yeah, he, there's a house in Pawnee City, you know, the old Jensen place,
Mhm.
that he, it's that brick that he came over and Bill used to help him make the cement, you know, to put the bricks together.
Mhm. The mortar?
For his dad, yeah, the mortar for his dad. Of course, I didn't know anything about that then, and Bill didn't either. But he just came to Pawnee City and helped him build that. You know what I mean, that brick building of the Jensens.
Mhm.
Yeah. His dad came over and helped. And of course, when Bill was growing up, he had to help his dad mix that stuff too. That's what he did for a living. And of course, during the war, hard times, things were kind of tough then,
Mhm.
because they weren't building during the hard times, so they did
Right.
kind of hard. But yeah, we went to prom together, went to dances together, and it was kind of surprising. But that's happened to a lot of people. Say, I wanted to tell you about Laura Turnbull. Can I tell you that on this? She's marrying somebody that she knew way back when she was a kid.
You're
And-
kidding.
No, and lived in Nebraska someplace. He's moved back. He came back to see her, and they're going to get married.
Wow.
That's not Laura though. Laura's
Right.
going to be Laura's going to be the bridesmaid
Wait,
for Laura Turnbull.
Wait a second. What we?
Shut it off.